Page 71. You ready?
Oh, they said 72.
Oh, maybe I did. I did say 72. You're
Page-
right.
page
72. You're
89.
right. You weren't even got it. 72. We're good. We're good with that. So question number 5 that you were to answer yesterday, provide some evidentiary facts that demonstrate the Gospel of Luke to be a trusted document in what it records. Yes.
He names 11 historically confirmed leaders in the first 3 chapters.
Right. So he names these leaders that have been corroborated by outside sources, not Christian sources, by sources, non-Christian sources, that those were the actual leaders. What else? Yes.
He talks about the which is a
Yeah. And what's interesting about that? Hematidrosis is what it's called.
like he wouldn't really have known.
Well, what was Luke's profession? Doctor. And that would have been particularly interesting to him. I think that's why he's the only one that mentions that. What else? Yes.
He was tested on like 84 historical points. It was true.
All of them, yeah. And the same is true of Acts, also written by Luke. And I think that's germane because I had an incident yesterday. I'm not going to name names, but a student was caught in an untruth. Actually, two. And I said to both of them, "This is really sad because now I know I can't trust you." Right? If you are trustworthy, people trust you. If you're not, well, they might, but they're foolish. And so Luke shows himself to be trustworthy in Acts and in Luke, and so we can assume that that they are trustworthy documents. And I think that's important. So Luke is the predecessor of Acts. It's a 2-part letter to Theophilus. The first thing he says in Acts is, "In my last letter to you, my dear Theophilus." That last letter was what we call Luke. And so they were both written to the same guy, who was obviously Roman with the name Theophilus. And yeah, all kinds of archaeological and historical corroboration by Josephus and others. Number 6, provide. Excuse me. Voice is changing. Provide some evidentiary facts that demonstrate the Gospel of John to be a trusted document in what it records. Yes, Jacob. Yeah, proper place of Jacob's well that you can visit today. Well, not today. Yes.
Archaeology confirms.
What?
Archaeology confirms.
Yeah. And even like specific words for a type of boat or things like that was in use during that time, that sort of thing. Yes, Laura.
Rights of Jesus, like spending money with us.
That's Luke.
Jesus washing feet, that would be really like interesting.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this to you guys last year, but that is the only place in all of ancient literature of a superior, a culturally superior person washing the feet of someone who is culturally inferior. In fact, not even Jewish slaves could wash people's feet. It was seen to be too demeaning for any Jew to do. So only Gentile slaves could wash someone's feet. That would have been well, obviously unheard of, but it would have been shocking to the original readers. Anything else? Okay. So there are all kinds of historically and archaeologically confirmed facts in both Luke and John, and all the Gospels actually. So now you're going to open your books, your Big Atheist books, to page 269. Follow along with me. We're gonna read, and then we're gonna answer some questions, and then we'll call it a day. So it says historical crosshairs. What are crosshairs? Do you have any hunters in the room? Yeah, it's shooting game. Yeah, right. He's a hunter on Atari. On Atari. I haven't played video games in so long. My boys, like, all the time were like, play video games with me, Mom, play video. And I literally, intentionally never learned any of it. Xbox, whatever, none of it. You know why?
I could win.
No. I would not want to lose. That is true. I knew I would like it.
Oh.
And I knew I would waste way too, just like I did on this Pac-Man back in the day. Waste way too much time on it. So I never learned. I think I told you, my grandson, I played one time with my grandson, and I did so badly, he told me that I was worse than Grandma Sonia, who was his great-grandmother.
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah. You're worse than Grandma Sonia. I just kept pressing buttons. Oh, that happens. I didn't know it. Okay, historical crosshairs. Let's review what we found so far by looking at just a few New Testament documents, John, Luke, and half of Acts. We have found more than 140 details that appear to be authentic, most of which have been historically confirmed, and some of which are historically probable. If we investigated the other New Testament documents, we would probably find more historical facts. Time and space does not permit us to embark on such an investigation. But what we have found just from John, Luke, and Acts is certainly enough to establish the historicity of the basic New Testament story, the life of Jesus and the early history of the church. But there's even more evidence of historicity. The New Testament writers put historical crosshairs into their accounts by referencing real historical figures and their doings. All in all, there are at least 30 characters in the New Testament who have been confirmed as historical by archaeology or non-Christian sources. For example, Matthew mentions independently confirmed historical figures including Herod the Great and his 3 sons, Herod Archelaus, Herod Philip, and Herod Antipas. Matthew also describes the man Herod Antipas killed John the Baptist, along with the 2 women who instigated the killing, Herodias and her daughter. Mark tells the same story about Herod Antipas and John the Baptist, and Luke extends the biblical citations of the Herodian bloodline by mentioning Herod the Great's grandson, Agrippa I, the king who killed James, John's brother. That was very early on in the church after Jesus' death and resurrection. And his great-grandson, Agrippa II, the king before whom Paul testified. Pilate is a prominent figure in all 4 Gospels and is cited by Paul. This same Pilate appears on several occasions in 2 of Josephus's works, Antiquities and the Wars of the Jews. And it is identified in an ancient inscription as the prefect, the governor of Judea. This archaeological discovery was made in the Israeli coastal town of Caesarea in 1961. In addition to Pilate, Matthew, Luke, and John specifically name another leader who figured prominently in Jesus' death, the high priest Caiaphas, who sentenced Jesus to die. Caiaphas was not only mentioned by Josephus, but his actual bones were discovered in a fantastic archaeological discovery in 1990. This discovery was made possible by an ancient burial practice of the Jews. From about 20 BC to AD 70, the Jews had a custom of exhuming the body of an important person about a year after the death and placing the remains in a small limestone box called an ossuary. In a tomb located to the south of Jerusalem, several of these ossuaries were discovered, one of which bore the Aramaic inscription Yehoseph bar Caiaphas, Joseph son of Caiaphas. Inside were the bones of an entire family, 4 young people, an adult woman, and a 60-year-old man. The man is very likely the former high priest, Joseph Caiaphas, the same one whom Josephus identified as the high priest, and the same man the New Testament says sentenced Jesus to die. So now we not only have non-Christian written references to the high priest at Jesus' trial, we also have his bones. As Table 10.1 illustrates, there are several other New Testament figures confirmed outside the New Testament. These include Quirinius, who was governor when the census was taken, Sergius Paulus, Gallio, Felix, Festus, Augustus, Caesar, Tiberius Caesar, and Claudius. What else could the New Testament writers have done to prove that they were eyewitnesses who were not making up a story? And it goes through all those names on that chart. You can read about it. The New Testament, a historical novel or novel history. Which meaning new history. In spite of these 140 plus eyewitness details and 30 plus references to real people, a hardened skeptic might say, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the New Testament is true. Suppose it's a historical novel, fiction set in a real historical context, something similar to a Tom Clancy novel. There are many problems with this theory. First, it can't explain why independent non-Christian writers collectively reveal a storyline similar to the New Testament. If the New Testament events are fictional, then why do the non-Christian writers record some of them as though they actually occurred? Second, it can't explain why the New Testament writers endured persecution, torture, and death. Why would they have done so for a fictional story? More on this in the next chapter. Third, historical novelists usually do not use the names of real people for the main characters in their stories. If they did, those real people, especially powerful government officials and religious officials, would deny the story, destroy the credibility of the authors, and maybe even take punitive action against them for doing so. As we have seen, the New Testament includes at least 30 actual historical figures who have been confirmed by non-Christian sources, and many of these are prominent and powerful leaders. Finally, since the New Testament contains multiple independent accounts of these events by 9 different authors, the historical novel theory would require a grand conspiracy over a 20 to 50 year period between those 9 authors, who were spread all over the ancient world. This is not plausible either. In fact, the assertion that the New Testament events are part of a grand conspiracy exists only in novels. In the real world, such assertions are crushed by the weight of the evidence. The New Testament, one source or many? Wait, the skeptic might protest. You might have eyewitness testimony, but you can't believe the New Testament because it's just from one source. They are not multiple independent accounts, as you say. This is a common error skeptics make because they fail to distinguish between the Bible as a religious book and the historical documents that comprise the Bible. When considering the historicity of the New Testament, we constantly must remind ourselves that the New Testament we see in a Bible is a collection of largely independent writings from the pens of 9 different authors. It was not written or edited by one person or by the church. While the New Testament writers describe many of the same events and may even draw material from some earlier sources, the evidence indicates that the New Testament documents contain several lines of independent eyewitness testimony. How do we know that we have independent eyewitness testimony? Because 1, each major author includes early and unique material that only eyewitnesses would know, and 2, their accounts describe the same basic events but include divergent details. Why are divergent details important? Because if the accounts were all from one source or a single editor, there would be harmonization, not divergent details. When early accounts tell the same basic story but include divergent details, historians rightly conclude that they have independent eyewitness accounts of actual historical events. Historical test 3 from page 231. The story certainly cannot be made up because independent sources could never invent the same fictional story. So if there's a car accident or if there's a crime and the police come to investigate, this is what they're looking for. If they get the exact same story from everyone, they know there's collusion, that they said, okay, here's the story. Let's all tell the same story. They're looking for the same basic storyline with different details. Because if 4 different people see the same event, they're going to see holistically the same thing, but individually they're going to see different details. That's exactly what we have in the New Testament. By these criteria, we know that John and Mark are independent, and we know that Luke and Matthew differ enough from Mark and from one another to be products of independent attestation as well. Most scholars believe that Mark was the earliest gospel, and that some of the other writers used some of his material in that. So, as well. So there are at least 4 independent sources for the basic New Testament story, and adding Paul and Peter to the mix, there are at least 6 independent sources for the resurrection. 6 sane, sober eyewitnesses who refuse to recant, refuse to remove or disavow their testimony, even under the threat of death, would convict anyone of anything in any court of law, even without the additional lines of corroborating evidence that says the same thing, that support the New Testament story. Such eyewitness testimony yields a verdict that is certain beyond a reasonable doubt. Unless you saw the event yourself, you can't be any more certain than those historical events actually concurred. So, summary and conclusion. We saw from chapter 9 that the New Testament documents are early and contain even earlier source material. We saw at least 10 ancient non-Christian writers within 150 years of his life give information about Jesus, and their collective references provide a storyline consistent with the New Testament. From this chapter, we conclude the New Testament contains at least 4 to 6 lines of early independent eyewitness written testimony. Include this because the major New Testament writers record the same basic events with diverging details and some unique material. They cite at least 30 real historical figures who have been confirmed by ancient non-Christian writers and various archaeological discoveries. Luke peppers the second half of Acts with at least 84 historically confirmed eyewitness details and includes several others in his gospel. Luke's proven trustworthiness affirms that of Matthew and Mark because they record the same basic story. John includes at least 59 historically confirmed or historically probable eyewitness details in his gospel. Paul and Peter provide the 5th and 6th written testimonies to the resurrection. Since this early independent eyewitness testimony is within one generation of the events, the New Testament events cannot be considered legendary. So there's no question that the real historical events are at the core, of the New Testament. The bottom line is that a skeptic has to have a lot of faith to believe that the New Testament is fiction. However, there are more issues to investigate before concluding that the New Testament is definitely historically reliable. For example, how do we know that the eyewitness testimony is not exaggerated or embellished? That's the question we'll address in the next chapter. Now, go back to your little atheist books and turn to Equip 7. First question: what are some of the historical crosshairs that the New Testament writers put into their accounts and what significance do they have in confirming the message? So what are some of the crosshairs that they put? Things that would easily kill the New Testament if they're false. Yeah. Go ahead, Lorelai.
Not to mention some other.
A whole lot of historical figures. Cheyenne, what were you going to say?
Exactly.
Okay. Not only people, but places and geography and topography. And Luke mentions at one point that I think it was Fair Havens. No, that's maybe where they dropped anchors. But there was a port off of Crete or Corsica that wasn't suitable to try and dock in, and because of the way it was configured. Strict details, distinct details, again and again and again. And in the first part of Acts, it's interesting. The first part of Acts, Luke keeps saying, and then they did this, and then they did this, and then they did this, and then all of a sudden he says, and then we went to, and so we know that at that point Luke actually joined the party. He actually traveled with Paul on those excursions that he was taking. So he was there with them when they were shipwrecked, when any number of things. So we have numerous historically and archaeologically confirmed facts that can be shown to be true or false, but they've all been shown to be true. What are some of the historical crosshairs that the New Testament writers put into their accounts, and what significance? Excuse me. I'm sorry. I already read that one. I thought I read that one about that. What? Okay. I'm going to read this then. I was reading the wrong one. At least 30 people have been confirmed by archaeology or history, and that by anti or non-Christian sources, including Herod the Great and his sons, and Pilate and Caiaphas, and many others have been confirmed by outside sources in archaeology, as well as geographical things, as we said. What pieces of evidence do the authors give in response to the claim that the New Testament is nothing more than a historical novel? Aside from the fact that that genre did not exist in ancient times. That's a very new genre. C.S. Lewis talks about, I've been studying writing for most of my life, and that genre, they either created the genre or they knew that it would become a type of genre thousands of years later. But aside from that, what evidence do the authors give, or what evidence do you have that it's not an historical novel? Yes.
Non-Christian writers reveal the same story.
Yeah, non-Christian writers reveal the same storyline. What else? Yes.
You can't explain why the New Testament writers endured persecution.
They were in a unique position. They knew for sure whether it was true or false, whether Jesus rose from the dead or not. Which means they died for a lie they knew was a lie. And it's not like they were making a lot of money off of it. They were making no money off of it. They were profiting nothing. What else? Lorelai.
They use all the same.
Yeah. They use all the same names. They agree with one another. And they lived all over, Paul was constantly on the go. It wasn't like they all got together and said, okay, this is what we're going to say. And they're independent. What that is saying is they're independent sources. They didn't crib off each other. And in order to have come up with a story together, there would have had to have been massive collusion and uh, deceit a long time, and from a lot of people. And that's not what history tells us happened. How do we know that we have independent eyewitness testimony? Yeah.
Major author includes
Yeah, they don't, they're similar, especially the Gospels are similar, but um, they have unique details. For example, only John tells the story of breakfast by the sea and the conversation between Jesus and Peter about feed my sheep. That's the only place that's recorded. That's independent, and he was there. And he gives great details, like how many fish they caught. And so, yeah, very, very detailed. But then they also have divergent details, right? They tell the same story, and they say things that only an eyewitness would know, but they also would have divergent details, which is not what happens when you don't have independent sources. Okay, I think there's one more we were going to talk about. Okay, so equip 2. Did we already do that one? We already talked about that one? Yeah. We did? Okay. Okay, so that's it for today. I'm going to give you your study guide for your test, or your quiz. Actually, it's a quiz, which will be on Tuesday. Did you already get it?